Hey, I'm Just Willie. I'm a TV and media critic who occasionally branches out to other stuff. If you want to know the story, go and watch the back catalog. If you're just interested in a review of the thing you clicked on, sit back, relax, and don't ask questions. Or if you have questions, leave them in the comments. Maybe I'll answer. The only question you can be sure I'm gonna answer is, did I get what I paid for? How's it going, everyone? Jess here. Did you notice the truncated opening credits? There's a reason for that. Back in the tier list episode, I said I was gonna do 4 major callback episodes to reviews from the previous seasons. This one goes all the way back to season 0. 6 of those 7 episodes were very different from the way I do things now. There were no random side adventures that have nothing to do with the movie I'm reviewing. There are no interruptions by someone much funnier than I am. It was just me talking to you about a movie while making a few wise remarks. I felt if I was going to get nostalgic, just this once, I would go back to making videos that way. I know most of you are going, oh Lord, why? So that's why I might seem a little bit more dour than usual. The show was a lot more pure in those early days. When I hated something, I didn't simply dislike it. I outright despised it. There's only been one thing we've reviewed since that I've hated the same way that I hated the bad things we watched in season 0. But when I loved something, it was truly a special surprise since all but one of those films was in the public domain. It was like finding a gem that only I knew about. As for what I have for us today, well, I had any number of choices. I could have gone with Laurel and Hardy, or Dick Tracy, or Nancy Drew. But no. Once I received arcane and eldritch lore from the vaults of Miskatonic University, my fate was sealed. For you see, my first review was of the cinematic classic Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. It was a vehicle for stand-up comic Sammy Petrello and lounge singer Duke Mitchell. They were a dollar store knockoff Martin and Lewis. But, as the title suggests, the movie stars Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. It was directed by William Beaudine and is about a man who turns into a gorilla. What I didn't know at the time was that Beaudine's true disaster piece was far from his first time working with Bela Lugosi. They had done a movie called Voodoo Man back in 1944. To make matters worse, Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla wasn't even the first man turns into another form of primate movie that William Beaudine had made with Bela Lugosi. Once I learned that, whatever choice I had was gone. This was my destiny, my bête noire, my personal hell. Or you can call it 1943's The Ape Man. If that's not enough, Bela Lugosi seems to be the actor people want to see interact with monkeys. He was in the Rich Brothers movie The Gorilla back in 1939. A dollar store Martin and Lewis is one thing, but a wannabe Marx Brothers? That's where I draw my line in the sand. You want to see me review that? You gotta pay me. Go to patreon.com/ParityErrorFilms and become a patron today. Anyway, our story begins with this toy boat sailing across a tub on a studio backlot. Meanwhile, these reporters are joking that ships always come to such horrible places. A reporter leans up to his photographer and says, "What are you complaining about? This is 1943. Tomorrow you go from shooting debutantes getting off of ships with your camera to getting shot at by Nazis with machine guns. The photographer says, trust me, if I can dodge Mae West's lawyers, bullets aren't gonna be a problem. Over at the exposition desk, Ryan Stiles is reading the Plot Convenience Times. He sees an article that says, totally not Michael Palin worried that his friend, Dr. James Brewster, the endocrinologist, has gone missing. That's right. Bela Lugosi, the most Hungarian of Hungarian actors, is straddled with the most American-sounding name imaginable. The weirdo asked the cop for his opinion because he thinks it's fishy. You know what I find fishy? Palin is right there, and he doesn't even comment until we cut to and from another stock shot of the ship. He walks up to him and says, hey, you're here to pick up the doc's sister, in both senses of the word, am I right? Then he wanders off to go talk to the reporters. He said, you know, the sister of the missing doctor's on that boat. Maybe you guys should look into it. Then he creeps away to the corner. People start getting off the boat. He walks up to them and points her out, and they don't even bother thanking him. They go to hassle her. They say, is it true you and Mustache Man are having a covert affair? Is it true you're pregnant? Was your family name originally Acula and then you changed it to Brewster when you came to the U.S.? She says, no interviews, now f off. As she and Mr. Mustache walk off, he says, none of this would have happened if John had only listened to me. She says, what are you talking about? I have the police out there looking for him. He says, look, you know the whole mad science thing we're into? Well, we were having a bit of success, but the grant money we were promised was given over to J. Robert Oppenheimer. So we rock, paper, scissored it to decide who would be the guinea pig. Paper covers rock, so I got him hiding out in my summer cabin. She asked, why? He said, never mind. Just be aware that if we reach a point where the options are death or him being in a movie with Sammy Petrello, he wants us to shoot him. So they go to Nancy Drew's house where they keep a secret lab. They travel through all these secret tunnels. The place is a mess. It looks like a bunch of cave people were being chased by a vampire down there. Sorry, that joke might not make sense. It depends on the order that these episodes are released. Finally, they reach a cage where George is keeping a gorilla and what looks like Bela Lugosi after a week-long morphine binge. And Agatha freaks out. Lugosi says, I don't want you seeing me like this. However, they let Lugosi out of the cage anyway, but he has to wrestle the gorilla before he can get out of there. Before you say that's a step up from the other monkey movies I've watched, he still beats the shit out of the poor gorilla after he's out of there. I think that if they had used a real gorilla instead of a guy in a suit, PETA would have been all over this. Back at the paper, this reporter named Jefferson Carter is burning the midnight oil. His editor calls him and says, why is your story late? Carter says, she wouldn't give me anything to work with, so I dug through the archive to see what I could find on her. And man, is this chick into some twisted fish. The editor says, we don't publish sleazy gossip. Unless we're trying to frame Spider-Man. Now take Mason and go get the real story. This woman is sitting next to the editor. She looks at the photos that the guy who left to die in Italy took. She says, wow, it's out of focus, overdeveloped, and double exposed. You'd think the guy was getting a photo of Bigfoot, not a middle-aged heiress. If this is the guy I'm replacing, I should have no trouble making this gig permanent. I'd better get to work. Robbie Robertson introduces Carter to Billy Mason, but Carter is so focused on his writing that he doesn't notice anything strange until 2 minutes later when he smells her perfume. Carter goes to ask the chief where his new photographer is. Mason says, "I'm right here." Carter doesn't believe her. Robertson says, "Don't bother the chief right now. He's trying to decide the winner of our junior reporter contest. It's down to Bess Marvin and Nancy Drew." As they get into the car to go to the mansion, she says, "You seem able-bodied and have an IQ above room temperature. Why aren't you out there fighting Hitler?" He says, "You want the truth? I was chosen to be the second test subject for something called Project Rebirth. Only the scientist in charge was killed by Nazis." She says, "Really?" He says, "Nah, I got a letter in the mail today. In 30 days, I'm property of the U.S. Navy." She says, "Well, hopefully you'll have this story done in 30 days. But given how your last interview went, I wouldn't count on it." Meanwhile, in the lab, Bela Lugosi is playing with his creepy crawlers kit to see if he can find a cure. Even with Agatha's help, the best he can come up with is putting some lime in a coconut and mixing them both up. He gives up. He says, "Sometimes I can be normal. The next minute, I'll go all animalistic." And Agatha comes in. She says, "There's gotta be something you can do." He says, "There is. All I need is some human spinal fluid to counteract the ape fluid. It'll work. I know this. George knows this. He just won't give it to me." She says, "Well, maybe I could talk to him." Brewster says, "Nah, he'll never go for it." Agatha goes to talk to George, just like Lugosi wanted her to. He says, "Did he mention why he needed it?" She said, Yeah. He's my brother. Why do you think I'm asking?" George says, "Did he happen to mention that in order to get it, somebody would have to die?" She says, No, but, how do I put this politely? It's not like I care." So, of course, Carter and Mason show up. Carter says, "Before we go in there, there's something you should know. Agatha is, well, she's a ghost hunter." Mason says, "Really?" Carter says, "Yup. Think a less successful Lorraine Warren. Strictly History Channel level bullshit." Back in the lab, Lugosi tells the gorilla to shut up. It keeps chattering away. If I didn't know better, I'd think it was singing, "Do I love you, oh, do I, baby, deed I do." If you don't think you can train an ape to do that, that's nothing. Bella has got his to go quiet whenever the monitor to its Ring doorbell turns on. The reporters weaseled their way in, saying they need better photos. Don't worry, they're not investigating her brother's disappearance. This is for a Sunday supplement on ghosts and poltergeists. Not a true crime story. Scout's honor. They go to the library to chit-chat about ghosts. She says, "I would love to redecorate or at least get books printed after 1865. But the ghost or whatever won't have it. I came in here last week to read the latest Hardy Boys novel, and they set it on fire with pyrokinesis." Mason says, "Surely you can't believe that." Agatha says, "Of course I do. There are 3 types of ghosts. They're the ordinary ones. You can't see them, you can't hear them, but they're there. Then there are disturbed spirits, serial killers, ruthless dictators, the heads of your local HOA. All the types of people that you want having unbridled power. Why, last summer I went to the Castle Hotel and almost became the second posthumous victim of H.H. Holmes. There's a third type of ghost. They're not relevant to this story at all, so I have no idea why I bring them up. But they do nice things like refill your toilet paper dispenser when no one's looking. Carter and Mason still don't believe her, but she offers proof. She made a recording during her trip to Scotland. And it sounds like R2-D2 having a stroke. Bela uses the sound to cover his movements. So while Carter and Mason are getting photos, he's creeping around in the other room. The good old Doc gets a look at Mason and decides he'd like to access her backside to extract spinal fluid. Get your mind out of the gutter. Really, what the fuck is wrong with you, you perv? But they leave. As they're driving home, they're talking about how cuckoo bananas Agatha is, which is completely unlike most of today's media outlets. Most of them would tie it into their belief that vaccines caused the lizard people to fake the moon landing. Agatha goes to see Brewster. She says, "You're right, George won't help us, but there's gotta be something we can do." Brewster says, "Unless you plan on volunteering, get the fuck out." After she leaves, he starts throwing test tubes at Zira. She throws her piss bowl right back at him. As this movie keeps reminding us, this is the 1940s. This sort of display of domestic violence is considered normal. They soon make up. Lugosi lets her out and they go upstairs to spy on George while he completes his research. Not for, ew, gross, don't even go there. Dude, you're disgusting. Bella climbs into George's window. George says, "Are you serious, man? I was down for turning one of us into an ape. I didn't sign on for anything else." Lugosi says, "Come on, just one little homicide. Really, what is more valuable? My health and sanity, a man within whose mind lies the potential cure to all human disease? Or some nobody off the street?" George asks, would a sane and rational person even ask that question? Bella says, "Fine, I guess I'll go unalive." Before he can even finish the sentence, the butler walks in. He says, "The cops are here, but you gotta make it quick because they're due back on the Dick Tracy set in an hour." Before going to talk to Detective Nice Hat, George tells Bella not to leave the room. So the first thing Bella does when George leaves is go to the window and signal the gorilla. The butler comes in. He spots them and instantly recognizes Brewster. So the gorilla strangles him. Bella says, "Since you know I'm alive, I have to kill you. And if I'm gonna kill you, I might as well harvest your spinal fluid." George returns to his study and finds the housekeeper dead. So he calls the cops. Wait, they were on the second floor. There is no way that detective has had time to leave yet. Why not go get him? Now he's just gonna have to repeat everything he just said to the new detective. Trust me, from my experience with the cops, that sort of thing takes hours. The medical examiner says, "Yup, strangulation, and by the looks of things, it had to be someone with immense strength." The cop says, "What's that in his hands?" The ME says, "It looks like some kind of animal hair." The cop says, that means our two prime suspects are Hulk Hogan and a gorilla. And if you ask Detective Munch, Hogan's got priors." Back at the Daily Bugle, Carter says, "Hey, look at tomorrow's front page. Isn't that Brewster's friend? It says a body was found there last night. Totally unconnected to our thing, right? I mean, the cops suspect an ape. Mason says, funny. I was looking at the photos I took and there's some sort of ghostly ape in it. Carter replies, great. First Barney fucks up. Now you? She says, no, I checked my film. If there's something weird in my shot, it was there when I took the photo. The fact that it's only in the shots that I took while she was playing the record of funny gorilla noises, I'm betting that's a complete coincidence. Back at the lab, Agatha says, what you got there? Lugosi says, nothing, just spinal fluid. She says, but George said he wouldn't give you any. He says, yeah, so, I killed the guy. Don't worry, George already knows. He'll be down here any minute to confront me. Then we can make him give me the injection. George comes down. He says, do you have any idea what you've done? Brewster says, yeah, I found a cure for myself. If you don't give me the shot, this poor sap literally died for nothing. Don't worry about the ethics of it. For all we know, he wanted to be an organ donor. Someone should get around to making that easier to determine. Maybe something with your driver's license? George says he won't give him the shot. Brewster says, hey, I'm still a doctor. I can have my nurse fill your prescription. For 9 millimeters of lead. Carter arrives and waits by the window. He watches the whole thing. Even the overly long sequence where Lugosi goes from his awkward ape walk to a more hominid gait. Once Brewster goes to indulge himself, in a shower, not whatever you were thinking, dude, gross, Carter knocks on the door. Agatha says, hey, I thought you said you would call if you had any more questions. Carter says, if I had any questions about your ghost story, my boss was so thrilled with that he decided to take on your brother's case. You know, the one you complained no one was taking seriously. Did your brother have any enemies? Any dangerous political ties? Was he doing any mad science experiments that could have gone bananas? Does he have a secret lab in the building? Yeah, he really Columbos his way through the interrogation before he leaves. Agatha goes to check on Lugosi. Before he can even finish shaving, the serum wears off. He starts begging and craving more, saying he needs it to remain normal. Agatha, who had zero qualms about this murder stuff before, says, yeah, maybe this has gone a bit too far. Since he can't rely on her for help, he turns to his one true friend, the gorilla. She'll help him do what he was always meant to do. Go out into the night draining people of their spinal fluid like some kind of vampire. This causes an eerie montage of murders and abductions. Half the extras in the film go missing. This leads the police chief to order a search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, outhouse, henhouse, and doghouse in the area. Back at the paper, Carter comes back. Mason says, where the hell were you? You've been gone for a week. Carter says, I was sticking out the Brewster house. The screenwriter forgot to give me stage directions, so I didn't think I was allowed to leave the set. The only reason I'm in this scene is that the 10% of our audience who are women will want some sort of resolution to our obvious sexual tension. She grunts, what sexual tension? Lugosi has taken all that spinal fluid to make a super soldier serum. Agatha calls George to get him to come over and inject it. He tells her to get bent. She asks, will you do it for a Scooby snack? He says, no. She asks, will you do it for 2 Scooby snacks? He says, no, I'm only staying on the line so the police can trace the call. She hangs up. Brewster asks, so, when's he coming over? She says, he's not. Lugosi says, fine, I'll go over there and make him. She says, don't be stupid. He'll have cops over there protecting him. So he knocks her out. Back at the paper, Carter says, well, I'm off to Brewster's again. The big climax is coming up. Mason asks, ooh, can I come? Carter says, no, this is a horror movie. You know what happens to women in horror movies, right? Yes, the Hays Code is a thing, but you could still be killed. She says, no, I can't. I'm not in league with evil, and I'm a named character with dialogue. Carter says, well, we still haven't resolved that sexual tension yet, so I can't take that chance. Agatha wakes up and does something, I guess. The cops guarding George's property get called away. If I had to put money on it, I'd say that Dick Tracy needed their help catching Boris Karloff. But they decide to stay on a hunch, not because they scanned the property before they left. It's not like that's a police procedure when dealing with someone in protective custody. And even if it were, this is the 1940s LAPD. Am I right? Anyway, Brewster breaks into George's lab again. He says, I've got the shot. This one is 12 times more powerful than the last one. It'll work for sure. If you give it to me, I'll leave you alone. If you don't, I'll kill you. George says, fine. But as Lugosi goes to get the needle, George takes the serum and smashes it to the ground. The cops hear the racket, and this gives them an exemption from having to get a warrant. By the time they get there, Monkey Boy is gone, but he left the window open. One of the cops decides to go out and chase after him. Agatha comes in. She says, George, my brother's going to... Oh, I guess he was already here. The cop says, wait, who did this? But she passes out. Meanwhile, Carter shows up at Brewster Manor. He starts scouring the place. Eventually, he starts feeling like he's being watched. And he is. By Mason. They keep barely missing each other in a suspense sequence added to pad the movie out to a 60-minute B-reel. She eventually spots someone, but she thinks it's Brewster. So she grabs a vase and conks him on the head. Oops. Only they aren't alone. Dr. Zayas really is there. He grabs her and drags her back to his lab. She's the last shot he's got at getting the spinal fluid he needs. And with Carter down for the count, there's no stopping him. Or is there? Carter wakes up. He chases Brewster down the corridors, but that last door is locked. So he calls the cops. Knowing it'll take them a while to get there, he does the right thing. Take the law into his own hands. Mason frees herself while Lugosi readies the equipment. There's a fight scene, but it ends with Mason letting the gorilla out. It immediately starts wrestling with Brewster. As revenge for beating her and, draining the spinal fluid out of her husband. Why else would it do that? You are one sick. How? You know that? Mason hightails it out of there. Neither she nor Carter can figure out the mechanism to open the door. But Mason has other problems. The gorilla has killed Lugosi, but she's still pretty pissed off. The cops brought Agatha with them because... reasons. But that's okay because she knows how to open the secret door. Mason escapes, but so does the gorilla. The cops just shoot it because... 'twas Beauty killed the beast? Carter and Mason head back to the car. He says, I should be really pissed at you, but I'm not. She says, what are you talking about? I just saved your life. He says, I think you got that backwards. I saved your life. She says, I gave you a concussion. You're no longer 1A. That means you're not gonna die on some godforsaken beach. The creepy guy who popped up at the beginning and a few other places I didn't mention says, "She's right, you know." Carter asks, "And how would you know?" The guy says, "I'm the screenwriter." Duh. And that's it. That's the movie. Yes! Rant Rap time! Yeah, I know I didn't call them that in Season 0, but they were there, so I'm gonna do one. Monogram Pictures was the quintessential Poverty Row studio. Name a genre that the big studios were doing, and chances are Monogram had their own cheap version of it. This movie couldn't decide if it wanted to be a slapstick comedy, a suspenseful thriller, or straight up horror. When you only have a 60-minute B-reel to work with, it's best not to try too hard. Pick a tone and stick to it. This movie doesn't do that. All that being said, there's at least one thing I like about it. Most of the time, Bela Lugosi relied on his natural charisma and something about his voice that made him seem inscrutable. By the 1940s, his days of playing Dracula were far behind him. He tended to get performances that were simultaneously over the top while he seemed to fall asleep. But that scene where he's talking to Agatha about how he needs the spinal fluid, and the way he convinces her to get George to get him some, that was surprisingly well done considering this is the Ape Man. As much as I would like to attribute that to Lugosi's skill as an actor, which he had a ton of, I don't think we can. Knowing what I do about Lugosi, especially at that point in his life, I think we're seeing him confront his own inner demons, the addictions that probably contributed to his ill health in his final days. I think that this role was very taxing for Lugosi emotionally, but really easy for him to do. All he had to do was open up a vein and bleed. The rest of the movie is kinda Wallace Ford and Louise Curry are fine, but their scenes don't match the horror tone of the rest of the film. Horror comedy can work. Most of Abbott and Costello's best movies fit into this genre. No, not you. Mel Brooks has done them twice to varying degrees of success. But with this movie, it didn't work. But they did the best they could with the material they were given. Still, I say when this movie works, it works really well. And when it's cheese, it's perfectly melted with just the right amount of seasoning to make really good dip. So if you like slightly corny movies, check this one out. Wait, I like a monkey movie unironically? Who knew? Anyway, that wraps this one up. I'll see you guys in our next surprising special.